Hello and welcome back to Underdog Investing. So today I'd like to talk about 4 different ways in which we can invest in SpaceX either now or in the future. So before I jump into the video, I'll be grateful if you can smash that like button and subscribe to the channel for future updates. So starting with the first one, you need wealth. So what do I mean by that? So you need to be an accredited investor, which is a person or entity that is allowed to invest in securities that are not registered with the SEC. And to be an accredited investor, an individual or entity must meet certain income and net worth guidelines. More specifically, you need a net worth which exceeds $1 million, not including primary residence, or your income exceeds $200,000 by yourself in the past 2 years, or $300,000 with a spouse for the past 2 years. So this one's quite straightforward. You either have it or you don't. Personally, I don't have this kind of money, so I need to have a look at the other options. And this takes me to the next one, which is, yes, Kathy Woods of ARK Invest. So if we have a look here at this SEC filing, you can see that on the 13th of January 2021, ARK had actually filed for a space exploration ETF under the ticker symbol ARKX. And included in this filing is the fact that, so it is proposed that this filing will become effective 75 days after filing. So 75 days after January the 13th is Monday the 29th of March. So this is when we can expect to be able to invest in this fund. So this is good news because we know that SpaceX is most likely going to be added into this fund. But at which point we don't know. So there's good and bad news about this. So starting with the good news from this article by Seeking Alpha. So in addition, we would speculate ARKX could be a way to obtain an indirect exposure to any future SpaceX IPO at something like a sensible price. So that's the good news. The fact that if we own any ARKX, we know that when ARKX purchased SpaceX when they IPO, they'll be able to purchase it at a reasonable price, or the actual IPO price, compared to if me and you as retail investors try to invest in SpaceX when it IPOs. We know that on the day of IPO, by the time we even get to invest, it will probably be double or triple the IPO price. So actually owning our ARK Invest ARKX ETF will give us an opportunity to own the part of the SpaceX for a reasonable price. So that's the good news. But what's the bad news? So if we have a look here, another space company garnering constant speculation and interest is Elon Musk's SpaceX. While SpaceX is still privately owned, it can't be included in the fund. So that's the bad news. The fact that while SpaceX is privately owned, ARKX will not be able to own any of it. And we know that Elon Musk is not planning to IPO SpaceX for quite a long time, at least a few years. So it'll be a little while for this one. So that takes me to the next one, which is Google, or in this case Alphabet more specifically. So this one will be a more immediate way to invest in SpaceX. So does Alphabet own SpaceX stock? So Alphabet owned an estimated 7.5% of SpaceX stock following its joint investment with Fidelity in the space company in 2015. It's unclear whether subsequent funding rounds have diluted Alphabet's SpaceX holding. SpaceX valuation has soared from $10 billion at the time of Alphabet's investment to $46 billion after the 2020 funding round, which means that Alphabet's holding has appreciated. Investors can gain exposure to SpaceX directly through Apple stock. Okay, so the thing to note about this one is 7.5% of SpaceX stock. That's how much they bought. So if 7.5% of 10 billion is about 750 million. And we know that it went from 10 billion to 46 billion, but actually I checked again and it's actually around 60 billion now. So that's about 6x since they bought it. So if we take the 750 million and multiply that by 6, Alphabet's SpaceX holding has now gone from 750 million to 4.5 billion. And if we have a look at the Alphabet company, we can see that they've actually done really well in the last 6 months or so. So they've actually increased by about 40% almost. And the interesting thing is, so the market cap is around $1.4 trillion for Alphabet. So we can actually calculate how much of Alphabet is actually SpaceX. So what you do is you just take the 4.5 billion and divide that by the 1.4 trillion and you get 0.003. And to turn that into a percentage, I just multiply that by 100. So this tells me that 0.32% of Alphabet company is actually SpaceX. So it doesn't sound like much, does it? So every time you buy a share of Alphabet, you're only getting 0.3% of that is actually SpaceX. But when you think about it, it's not too bad because it gives you an immediate way to invest in SpaceX. That's the first thing. And the second thing is the rest of the 99% that you're purchasing isn't just rubbish. Alphabet is an amazing company, and it is basically investing in innovation and it's investing in the future. So you're also investing in a good company whilst being able to purchase some of SpaceX. So it's not a bad thing. And the other thing to note is, if we have a look at this diagram here, Google have not only invested in SpaceX in terms of this space play. They've invested since 2008, and if we have a look here, they've invested 65 million, 230 million, 13 million, and then 460 million. So that's almost $1 billion into O3b. And what is O3b? O3b is a satellite connectivity company which began in 2008, right? And the CEO, Greg Weiler, promised to connect the other 3 billion, hence O3b, to high throughput internet via a satellite constellation in medium Earth orbit. So this likely served as a strategic investment in global broadband internet for Google. So they're investing in other companies which deal with space and satellite connectivity. You've got other companies like Terabella, Orbital Insight. So you can see that you're not just owning SpaceX, you're owning other types of space plays by owning Alphabet. So the final one is Starlink. So Starlink is a satellite internet constellation being constructed by SpaceX, providing satellite internet access. So basically, SpaceX don't want to IPO, and they want to stay private. But what they want to do is generate lots of money, and the way they're planning to do that is by spinning off a company called Starlink, which basically sends thousands of satellites into orbit, and it creates this internet connectivity money-making machine. And if we have a look at this tweet by Elon Musk, we will probably IPO Starlink, but only several years in the future when revenue growth is smooth and predictable. Public market does not like erratic cash flow. I'm a huge fan of small retail investors. We'll make sure they get top priority. You can hold me to it. Okay, so there's two main things here. So we know that Starlink is unlikely to IPO for the next few years, based on this tweet, which was put out in September 2020. The other thing is we can see that he's a big fan of small retail investors. And one of the things I've got from this is, I don't know, this is my personal opinion, but it might be a good idea to own some Tesla shares. And the reason is because there's a possibility that he might give access for Tesla shareholders to own a small amount of Starlink shares when it IPOs at a reasonable price. For example, similar to what Airbnb did with basically their hosts were given the right to purchase Airbnb shares at IPO for the IPO price, compared to people like me and myself who didn't own any. Basically, I'm not an Airbnb host, so when it came to trying to buy Airbnb shares, on the first day they pretty much doubled in price, so it was impossible to get in. I think Elon Musk might consider doing a similar thing with Tesla and Starlink, where if you own some Tesla shares, he may give you an option to purchase some Starlink shares at a reasonable price during the IPO, but that's just my personal opinion. So that's the end of the video. So those are the 4 ways in which I think you can invest in SpaceX. If you enjoyed it, I'll be grateful if you can smash that like button and subscribe to the channel for future updates. And I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments section down below. which option is most appealing to you, and are there any other options that you've identified which you'd like to share? And if you found it useful in any way, I'll be grateful if you can share this video. So I'll see you in the next video. Thank you so much.